I'm voting for Andrew Yang, and I'm going to tell you why. He's the only political candidate who truly understands the gravest threat to our economy right now, and that's automation eliminating jobs. It's not some future fantasy. It's already happening. It's the reason why Trump was elected in the last election. Now, the last election, the politicians finally acknowledged that the economy wasn't working for everyone, but they weren't talking to real solutions. They were blaming China, trade, immigrants. Andrew Yang is the only one not only acknowledging the real source of the problem, automation, but he's the only one proposing a real solution, the Freedom Dividend, universal basic income, just giving every adult human $1,000 per month. Now, it sounds too good to be true, but it really is that simple. Would this solve all problems? Of course not, but this would go so much towards solving so many problems, and I haven't seen any other candidate, whether that be Bernie Sanders or anybody else, propose any real solutions to addressing this problem. And it's not even about automation, it's about lifting up the bar, lifting up the minimum, ensuring that people at least have some amount of purchasing power and aren't in total poverty. Now, a lot of people, when they first hear about this, they say, wouldn't it cause inflation? Well, I made a whole video on that, but basically it's not the printing of new money, it's a redistribution. No new money is printed, so we might see modest inflation, but it definitely wouldn't be some kind of hyperinflationary spiral. I know it's really hard to wrap your head around, but really this would completely change the economy. Things would be we wouldn't turn into Venezuela. When I first heard there was a candidate running on universal basic income, he automatically had my vote, and I didn't really pay any more attention to it. I thought there was no chance that he could ever win. Fast forward, he appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I watched his interview and I was completely blown away. This guy, even if he wasn't campaigning on automation and universal basic income, he'd still have my vote because he's very intelligent. So I'm going to just speak to some of the points that I really liked about him. So first of all, I loved what he said about not putting all this attention on GDP and unemployment rate and these metrics that don't really reflect the real economy, and instead use metrics that actually reflect the real lives of humans, like, for example, life expectancy, suicide rate, all that stuff. I haven't heard any other political candidate talk about this. They always say, oh, the economy, we're going to grow the economy 2%. Well, what the hell does that mean? If your life isn't getting any better, if your rent just keeps going up and your income isn't any higher, maybe you're losing your job, how does that benefit you? I love that he acknowledges the uselessness of these mainstream economic metrics. Other than that, to me, he's the only politician I've ever seen who actually speaks logically with facts and numbers. He sounds more like an engineer or a scientist than a politician. Most politicians, when you ask them a question, they don't actually answer the question. They dodge the question and they speak all this fluff, just appealing to the emotions and the lowest common denominator, like appealing to the dumbest people. This guy, he actually answers the question. He supports it with logic and facts. I've never really seen this in any other political candidate. So even just for that, he's got my vote. He also genuinely cares. You can see it in him, but just the fact that he started something like Venture for America, you've got to care to do something like that. I mean, you don't do that for the money. When I first heard about him, I thought, as great as he sounds, there's no way he's ever going to win. But watching his campaign, I think he has a legitimate chance of winning. Now, it's still in the early stages. His name isn't as well known, but he's got a really cult-like following, like the left's version of Trump, but except not a complete idiot. He seems to actually be appealing to a lot of Trump voters, which can't really be said by Bernie Sanders or any of the other Democratic candidates. So I think he actually has a serious shot. His proposals, compared to everybody else's, are just so radical that they're actually getting attention. And he just articulates himself so well. You look at the comments of any of his videos on his interviews, and people are just like, yeah, wow, this guy, he knows what he's talking about. He's not just bullshitting. He's not just trying to appeal to your emotions with words. If you are a US citizen and you aren't familiar with Andrew Yang, look him up. This guy's the real deal. He's the only political candidate who understands the biggest problem right now, the biggest threat to our economy, which is automation. He's the only political candidate who has a solution to it, the Freedom Dividend, which does more to just fix the job losses from automation. It eliminates poverty. I don't want to make the Freedom Dividend to sound like some silver bullet, but it's the closest thing to a silver bullet. If you're making $1,000 a month, you can literally, if you're in New York City and your rent is $3,000 a month or whatever, you can literally leave the city, go live in the middle of nowhere, and you can live off of less than $1,000 per month. This would fundamentally change the economy, just society, in ways that people drastically underestimate. We could stop focusing on money all the time and start focusing on helping our communities. This is like venture capital for the people. Anybody could do whatever they want to do. You don't have to work for somebody else. You don't have to sell yourself to somebody else. You can work on whatever you want to do, whether that be start your own business or, I don't know, plant flowers outside and make the community a nicer place. It doesn't really matter. This just puts the power in the hands. We still have this scarcity mindset, which I guess maybe it's just genetically ingrained in us from the hunter-gatherer days. We think that there's just such a limited amount of resources and everybody can't just have a basic living where we have to compete with each other like the Hunger Games or something. But I mean, if people knew how much wealth the ultra-wealthy have in this country, I think there would be riots on the streets tomorrow. I mean, it's just absurd, just generations not having to work. Meanwhile, you have people struggling to even get a job and pay rent, and most of America, they live paycheck to paycheck. It's completely unnecessary. Poverty is a human choice. In the first world, in wealthy countries, poverty is a complete human choice. Right now, we are choosing to perpetuate this system where people live in poverty, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can eliminate it. Freedom Dividend, universal basic income. Let's make this happen. Andrew Yang, 2020. Vote for Andrew Yang.
지디카라스